Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Alexis Johnson, and I am with the Center of Faculty Life. And we are doing a new Inspire podcast series where we look at exceptional faculty here at ATU, and we see what they're doing in the classroom, what sorts of activities and teaching they want you to know about, and get real insight. So I'm going to go ahead and let our guest introduce himself to you all and tell you what he teaches.
I'm Tommy Mumert. I'm an assistant professor of journalism. I'm also the advisor to the student newspaper, The Architect, the official student newspaper of Arkansas Tech University since 1923. And I have been at Tech 35 years. I don't call myself an old-timer now. I call myself a long-timer. And I teach a lot of the writing classes within our journalism sequence.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to start out with a really cheesy question.
Okay, good.
But what inspired you to become a faculty member?
It was kind of by accident, actually. When I started at Tech 35 years ago, I had several different titles. I was the director of what was then called the University News Bureau, which eventually morphed into University Relations. I was the advisor for the student newspaper, advisor to the student yearbook, which went away in 2008, and I had part-time faculty status. When the yearbook went away, I was given the option of either moving into a full-time faculty position or staying as News Bureau Director full-time, and I thought about it for about 5 minutes, and because I enjoyed teaching so much, I decided to move into a full-time teaching position.
Awesome, great. So tell me about any sort of activities or exercises that you use consistently in your classroom that you think that students actually really respond well to.
I will tell you about a new one that I added last fall. I was teaching for the first time ever a business and professional speaking class, and it was a virtual conference class, another first for me. And I wanted to try to do something that might help me connect with the students beyond just seeing their faces on the screen. So I came up with an assignment that, speaking of cheesy, I thought this may be kind of cheesy, but it was called a weekly check-in, worth 10 points a week. And basically the instructions each week were the same. Please tell me about your week. One of the reasons I wanted to do that also, in addition to the fact that I want to try to get to know these students better, is I would say a majority of that class were first semester freshmen. So I thought, okay, I really want to make sure they know that we as faculty care about them beyond just their performance in the classroom. And as I expected, I had a number of students that in the weekly check-in would say something like, "It was a good week, I just hung out with friends," or, "Oh, it was a bad week, the Razorbacks lost, but maybe they'll win next week." But at the same time, I had a number of students who really bought into the assignment, and by the time we got about halfway through the semester, they were really sharing things with me that were important to them, whether it was a test that they had coming up that they were worried about, different challenges they were facing, maybe I'm changing my major, my parents aren't happy, and in each case, I would offer a response and the feedback. Yeah. It might be, maybe they'll win next week, or, well, let me know how you do on that biology test you're worried about. And I would either get a separate email typically from those students, or in the next week's weekly check-in, they would say, "I did better than I thought," or, "Yeah, I really got to step up my game in this class." And it created a sort of dialogue between the students and I.
Awesome.
And it was one of those things where I was gratified by the end of the semester that I had a number of students tell me how much they appreciated it. A couple of them said I was really worried about what professors were going to be like when I got to college, and you've shown me that professors really do care about us. So that was something new that I added, and I've continued this semester.
Awesome. That's really awesome. I think that so many students are just so intimidated, and so allowing them space and then they start feeling safer and safer, they open up, and it gives you an idea of what's going on in their lives. So that's wonderful that you're doing that. How do you keep students engaged in your class? So if you have a topic that you know isn't necessarily the most popular, I mean, as you know, business and professional, it's speeches, and so a lot of times they're scared. How do you keep them engaged and interested if it's a topic you don't think they're going to love?
Boy, that's kind of like the $1 million question, I guess, but how to keep students engaged. A class like business and professional speaking, what I leaned on a lot was trying to foster classroom discussion based upon their own experiences. So, for instance, if maybe we're in a chapter where it's talking about communication and leadership styles, then I would say, okay, the work experiences you have had, tell me about the leadership styles of your bosses. And bless their hearts, some of these students have worked for horrible bosses, but some have worked for good bosses. But trying to get them to really look back at their own experiences and then relate them to, okay, now when you get in the workforce as a professional, what have you learned from this?
Yeah, that's a wonderful way, because that's something that they can then connect with, even if it's something that they're not super passionate about or excited about.
Yeah, I hope so anyway.
So how have you had to adapt your teaching over the years? I think it's great that we're talking to you because you've had an opportunity to work with so many different students. What have you noticed throughout the generations of how things have changed and how teaching maybe has had to change over the years? And what do you suggest to faculty to make sure that they're keeping up to date and fresh with the newest generation and their needs?
Another good question, but these are supposed to be good questions, right? One of the, I think, biggest changes that I've seen in students is they are much more willing these days, it seems like, to talk about challenges that they have. And I tell students that whatever course I'm teaching, that yes, I think this is very important, but I want you to know I recognize that on any given day, something may be going on in your life that's a little bit more important. And self-care is important, and just keep me in the loop. That's the big thing I want to know. If you're in a position where you're going to miss some kind of work and you want to try to make up the work, let me know no later than the day you're absent what's going on. And I understand there may be a day when you say, Mr. Mumert, man, I just couldn't get out of bed today. I'm just really struggling, and okay. And I find students much, which I think, it's the good and the bad. I'm sorry that some of our students struggle, but I appreciate the fact that they're more open about it now and willing to talk about it and maybe remove some of that stigma that there might have been in the past. And of course, when you talk about when I started teaching, we didn't really have to worry about students being so connected with technology and their cell phones and that kind of thing. But we've all had to deal with that. So yeah, definitely. It's
different technological needs and different needs of students have kind of come across over the years. I haven't been teaching as long as you, but I've definitely noticed that as well.
Yeah.
So, out of all of your classes, what assignment do you have that you get most excited about and that you notice your students get most excited about? Like, do you have an assignment that you're particularly proud of, or that you consistently are like, wow, that's incredible work, and the students love it?
Trying to think of a good example of that. I will tell you, and I don't think this is a great necessarily original assignment, but in my media writing class, which is our entry-level writing class, and then in the news and reporting class, we have a weekly current events quiz. And many times the initial reaction is, gotta pay attention to the news. But I think you would be surprised how many students by the end of the semester say, I can't stop watching the news now.
Yeah.
And I actually had I really appreciated this. I had a faculty member in another department 2 or 3 years ago reach out to me and say, tell me about your current events quiz. So I explained it to her, and she said, well, I just wondered because I've got a student in my class now who took your media writing class and said, those current events quizzes changed my life because now I find myself paying attention to the news, and I feel like I can now talk to people about what's going on in the news. I don't know that it's truly a life-changing assignment each week. But if you're a journalist, then you need to know what's going on in the world. And journalism is important. I mean, I think students recognize that I am what I say I am. I'm a journalism nerd. I love journalism, and I dare say that I think there are very few disciplines on campus right now that are being taught that are more important than journalism in today's society. I mean, a free press is central to everything we try to do as a democratic society. So a little bit biased, but that's one assignment that I can think of off the top of my head that I think they maybe not appreciate on the front end, but on the back end they see the value of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is important for people to feel like they're informed and be able to discuss things that are going on, and so that's really incredible. And I think that's really cool that you had a student who was talking about it. That shows that it is a really impactful assignment. So
yeah.
So this one's kind of an interesting one. Reflecting back, if you could give advice to your younger educator self, what would you say, and what would you want yourself to know or younger faculty to know about education and teaching, and any advice you would give to your younger self?
One of the things that I guess pride myself on, is a proper way to phrase it, is that almost any assignment that a student submits, whether it's, well, just about any assignment that they submit, I'm going to offer some type of feedback. And I think the feedback needs to be substantial feedback. If a student loses points for any part of an assignment, then they need to know what they could have done to have corrected that. And it's not totally uncommon in any given semester to get an email from a student or two who says, hey, just want you to know I really appreciate the feedback. I can tell you spend some time on it. I don't always get feedback in all my classes. I really appreciate it. So I think feedback is extremely important. So I would tell my younger self from the get-go, this is important. And the second thing is that I try to grade everything in a timely fashion. Yeah, we have things come up, but I would say that it's rare. For one thing, I think I probably get some kind of anxiety when I go into Blackboard to look up at the grade book and see a number. If it's above a certain number,
yes,
I get a little antsy. But I try to get everything graded usually within 2 or 3 days of when it's submitted, and I think students appreciate that as well. So those are two things that I would say, okay, from day one, you've got to give feedback that really matters, and you've got to get in and grade things quickly.
Yeah, I definitely can see that students would appreciate that too, and it might actually make your job a little easier, because you may get less students reaching out about their grades because they know where they sit and they're not as anxious about it. So that's really great advice, I think, for any faculty.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in your career, do you think? And what advice or what strategies did you take to help alleviate some of those challenges or help deal with some of those challenges?
For someone in my field who comes from a newspaper background, and you can probably see where this is going, one of the biggest challenges is just the whole idea of transitioning from a world of print to, okay, now we need to really think about the digital landscape and beyond just, okay, now we need to put our stories up on a website, but now how can we fully take advantage of that digital landscape, and what can we do to make those stories more than just what they would look like in a print product? So that certainly has been a challenge. And part of it also has been a challenge of, I think, dealing with the perception in recent years of journalism and what journalists do. This whole thing where maybe you meet someone and they say, what do you do? Oh, I teach journalism. And every once in a blue moon, but it's enough to annoy you, they may say, "Oh, teaching kids how to do fake news, huh?" And the whole perception thing is difficult to attack. But the only way I can really do that in the classroom, I think, is to emphasize to students how important journalism is, how important information is, how to vet the information that we seek, how to know the difference between misinformation, disinformation, how to fight that. And one of the things that I tell students that we are trying to do is make sure that when they go out into the real world or into the wild or whatever you want to call it, that they're better than the journalists who are out there working now. Because there are some very good journalists doing very good journalism, but there are some mediocre journalists too who seem to take the lazy way out sometimes. So we want our students, when they get out there, to be better.
Awesome. That's awesome. And then what has been one of the most fulfilling experiences in your teaching career so far? So what really makes your soul happy? Was there a student interaction? Or you can share a couple if you want.
It's because I've been teaching so long, I've had a lot of students who've gone out into the workforce, and because we teach a skills-based field to a large extent in terms of writing and photography and those types of things, it really is satisfying to see students now out there practicing journalism and doing an excellent job. Even though every now and then it might be a student that while they were here, you might have thought, I don't know, they're going to have to kind of up their game, and they do it.
Yeah.
And then there are the instances sometimes where you may have an interaction with a former student. Maybe they moved to the other side of the country, but now they're visiting family, and hey, you want to get together. And then they remind you of something that you said in class that really stuck with them. And there have been times, honestly, when I hear that and I think, wow, did I say that? But that really is fulfilling and very satisfying when you know, without getting too cheesy here, that, okay, to some extent I made a difference in that person's life, and the idea that there's a little bit of Mumert somewhere out there. And I joke sometimes about, okay, what I'm about to tell you is the gospel according to Mumert. This is the way you do so-and-so.
Yes.
And the fact that apparently there are some students out there who have accepted the gospel of Mumert and now say, well, you talked about blah, 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 and I've always remembered that. That's pretty special.
Yeah, that's definitely special. And I can tell you and everyone that Mr. Mumert, Tommy, has had so many students come through who love him. He has great evaluations every semester, and many of my advisees specifically request your courses just because of who you are as a faculty. So I guess to wrap it up and end, do you have any advice to your colleagues on how do you become an effective mentor, advisor, educator? What is the biggest piece of advice you'd want someone to take away that they could maybe implement or try to implement in their classrooms?
Oh, boy. I'm not beyond the classroom. I don't know that I'm real big on giving advice, but I think appreciating each student for the unique individual they are. Part of that, I think, comes from my journalism background. You know, there's this old adage that a good journalist can, if people remember what a phone book is, pick up a phone book and open it and go John Doe. And if you're a good journalist, you can go out and do an interesting story about John Doe, because John Doe is a unique individual with their own story to tell.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I kind of approach students as well. Each one has their own story to tell. They have their own life experiences, and I want to recognize what those are and, I don't know, kind of teach to their strengths, I guess, if you can kind of think of it that way, and really let them know that I care more about them than just you're a student in my class and what is your grade right now in my class and what assignments have you turned in, which ones have you not, that type of thing.
Awesome. That's wonderful advice. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our first official podcast on Inspire. We're so lucky to have Mr. Tommy Mumert share some of his expertise with us, and I hope that you'll continue watching with us and apply if you think you're an inspirational faculty and you want to be featured, or you know a faculty that you think should be featured. Thank you so much.